Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to mismapasion. And the first round of action at the Olympics has wrapped up in what was a really great start in the battle for gold. So, without too much waffling, let's take a look at all the games that took place in the first round of action. And where better to start but with Spain versus Japan. In a repeat of their epic clash from last year's World Cup, Spain and Japan once again locked horns in the group stage proceedings of the Olympics, and as expected, it was a lively start to proceedings mainly from Japan, who were quick to get off the mark and take the lead against the world champions, who were decidedly taking quite a fair bit of time to get into the game. Eventually, though, the Spaniards did find their rhythm, and their efforts were rewarded with a leveler from none other than Aitana Bonmati, who was cool, calm, and collected amidst a sea of defenders. With the score tied, Spain were now in full groove as their on-brand tiki-taka was on display for all to see, and it is not an understatement to say that Japan struggled to deal with the fast and fluid passing that was constantly harassing them. To the Nadeshko's credit, though, they did manage to adapt their game plan and were more than happy to let Spain have the ball as they responded with a very stodgy low block, with their aim being to stop the attack and then break with a devastating counter, which did threaten to inflict some damage, but La Roja did manage to call any attempts of this save for a few occasions. The second half provided more of the same, but Japan grew more confident and were more determined to get themselves forward and stop themselves from being pinned down so heavily in their own box by the opposition. The approach was threatening to pay dividends, but the focus from Japan was seemingly broken, especially by the unfortunate injury suffered by Risa Shimizu, who looked to have suffered a knee injury, most likely an ACL, but at the time of recording, it has not yet been confirmed. Nevertheless, it was an awful situation to bear witness to, especially since it occurred from a nothing instance, but it does show that, once again, more attention needs to be paid to improving player wellness in the women's game, and all the best to Shimizu as we wish her a speedy recovery. The loss of focus did ultimately prove to be Japan's undoing, as not too long after play had resumed, new Arsenal signing Mariona Caldente combined with ex-teammate Bonmati to give Spain the lead for the first time in the match, and that is ultimately how the game would end, with the world champions not only getting their win back from Japan, but also registering their first ever win in their maiden appearance at the Olympics in what is an awesome curtain raiser, along with our next match. With the turbulent 24 hours that saw the involvement of police arresting an assistant coach, FIFA and the IOC opening up investigations against the Canada women's football team, and the withdrawal of Bev Priestman from the dugout due to Olympic spygate, Canada versus New Zealand was a match that was mired in tension before the players had even stepped onto the pitch. The game itself was a close and intense affair, with neither team shying away from a generous helping of physicality towards one another. Somewhat surprisingly, it was New Zealand that broke the deadlock, with team captain Bowen taking the initiative to stun the Canadians. With them being in the lead, New Zealand were more than happy to sit back and defend their lead against their dominant opponent, who, despite carving out the majority of the attacking opportunities, failed to bring themselves back on level terms. And that was up until the dying embers of the first half, where a momentary lapse in the concentration at the back saw New Zealand get caught out, with Lacasse striking into the roof of the goal to cap off what had been a well-worked goal for the Canucks. Unfortunately for the Ferns, they seemed to run out of ideas against Canada, as for the majority of the second half, they were heavily pinned down and were besieged time and again. To their credit, New Zealand did do a good job of holding out for as long as they could, but some wild-time substitutions by the Maples eventually paid off as Roma stalwart Evelyn Vian took an excellent first-time shot to slot home and give Canada the lead for the first time in the game after being well picked out by Fleming. And just like the match we've just covered, it would end 2-1 in favor of the defending champions in what was an admittedly turgid affair highlighted by the aforementioned physicality that saw Canada essentially bully New Zealand off the park, which did see some injuries being suffered as a result, which hopefully won't be too devastating to the football front squad, as they still have two tough teams to get through before all is said and done. But a good start for Canada, all things considered. The second set of fixtures on the day saw another clash of major national powers, with Germany taking on Australia. The game started off very well, with the Germans dominating the initial proceedings of the game against an Australia team that struggled in general to get into the game, which proved to be the ultimate undoing, as we will soon get into. In what is essentially an ongoing theme of the preliminary rounds of the Olympics so far, the game would not stay deadlocked for long, as Germany opened the scoring with Marina Hegering rising highest and hitting past Mackenzie Arnold to give the Germans the deserved lead. And rather than sitting back and defending their lead, which would have been successful given how poor Australia were in this game, Germany continued on the front foot as they smelled blood in the water, with them constantly wreaking havoc for the Aussie defense, highlighted by an excellent attempt by Lea Schuler, who really should have doubled the lead for Germany at that point. As the game progressed, Australia did tease getting themselves back into the game with some decent attempts being crapped up by the likes of Fowler, but it was all in vain as Germany scored not once but twice, with Lea Schuler finally getting herself on the score sheet after a corner set piece saw her head past Arnold yet again, with Eula Brand, the player of the match in my opinion, volleying home a great attacking play to decisively blow Australia out of the water. Long story short, Australia got clobbered handily by Germany in a display that the Matildas will be hopefully not looking to repeat again after such a horrid display, which really can't be explained away apart from the simple fact that they just didn't show up. Germany, though, to their credit, did not put a single foot wrong and put their best foot forward in their campaign to reclaim Olympic gold and have set themselves up well for their colossal encounter against the USA come Sunday. Group C was opened up by a juicy encounter between Brazil and Nigeria, and from start to finish, this was one of the most fun matches that wasn't a goal fest, but really should have been in all honesty. Both teams started off very well, Nigeria unfortunately drawing the short stick when it came to their finishing, as two quickfire opportunities that came one after the other failed to go into the back of the net that on any other occasion would have been guaranteed goals. And I don't know whether it was the fact that the goals had not gone in or the fact that they were still level, but after their quick flurry, Nigeria suddenly switched off from an attacking sense, and all of a sudden, it became the Brazil show. With initiative coming from none other than Marta, Brazil quickly assumed control of the match, and it initially appeared as though the icon had put the Seleção ahead, but unfortunately, her attempt was ruled offside. Instead of being on the score sheet, Marta would end up on the assist sheet as she set up Gabby Nunes, who opened the scoring for the game. The momentum was firmly behind Brazil, who rode it out all the way to the end of the game as Nigeria just looked shell-shocked throughout as Brazil dazzled and pranced against the Super Falcons in a scintillating display that they will definitely be looking to carry over into the remaining group games against Spain and Japan, whilst Nigeria will be looking to pick up the pieces of a frankly dismal performance. And before we move on to the next match, best wishes go out to Gabby Portillo, who, just like Risa Shimizu, appeared to have suffered a knee injury, this time after colliding with an opposition defender, and hopefully it is not something long term, so here's to a speedy recovery for the Brazilian. Our next game is not even worth a concerted or detailed review, as the other Group B game saw Zambia being mauled by the USA. It was a fun game to watch because it was a glorified exhibition match between two countries on two completely different planes of quality, as the USA ran out 3-0 winners over 10-man Zambia, with goals coming from Mallory Swanson with a brace and Trinity Rodman to mark the USWNT's era under Emma Hayes to a rip-roaring start. Our final first round game saw host France taking on Colombia, and like I said in the predictions video, this is truly France's tournament to lose, and boy did they really do their best to lose in this game. It was a tale of two cities, as in the first half France were completely unplayable. Being spurred on by the home support, the French took little time in laying waste to Colombia's side, who looked dazed, confused, and ultimately overwhelmed by the occasion. Like a deer in the headlights, the Pop-Up Girls could not make heads or tails of what was going on, and they would soon pay for their poor performance in the first half by conceding 3 well-worked goals that came from Marie Antoinette Katoto, who was a proper nuisance to the opposition backline as she claimed a brace in the game, and Kenza Dali, who was pulling strings in midfield and got herself on the score sheet as a result. And much like the other teams that were on the win column, you'd have thought that France would keep going and trying to add more so as to really romp to victory. But again, this is a tale of two cities, and in the second half, the teams swapped roles. As defiant as ever, Colombia clapped back against their opposition in what should have been an epic comeback of the ages that fit into the mold for classic David versus Goliath. Chelsea sensation Mayra Ramirez answered the call in inspiring the charge for her team, as she earned a penalty after being brought down in the box by Pero Mena, off the back of being a pest to defensive legend Wendy Renard. Catalina Uzme slyly put away the penalty, and just like that, it was game on. Looking dazed and confused, France were completely out of it and would soon pay for it as substitute Manuela Pavi would dazzle with a tenacious chip to bring the deficit down to 1. Despite some frantic changes by boss Evrenard, France was still staring right down the barrel of a shock upset, and had it not been for a red on Ramirez, who accidentally stamped on Selma Batch's Achilles tendon, and though not intentional, was dangerous play and the card was deserved as a result. With the visitors being a man down, France were finally able to hold out for a little longer and ultimately come out on top over Colombia, who put up a spirited fight and really deserved to get at least a point out of the game. But as we all know, football is a cruel, cruel game. And those are all the games that took place over match day 1 at the woso Olympics. It's honestly a bit tough to pick out a game of the round because there's so many top contenders for it. So as always, you can share what match you thought was the best of the round in addition to any other thoughts you may have had concerning the games played so far in the comments below. And if you haven't already, you can check out the video I released yesterday discussing the ongoing scandal going on in Canada, which should be appearing on your screen just about now. If it hasn't already, make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.